Hey everyone, and welcome back.
Today's deep dive is something I think we've all thought about, especially as Christians.
Yeah.
It's that whole thing about criticism, right? When you
Yeah.
feel like you're under a microscope, like you're being held to this crazy high standard. And we're kind of diving into that today with this message from thickshades.com.
Have you heard of it? It's really encouraging.
And you know what I find so fascinating about this whole idea is this tension between
Striving for holiness and accepting our humanity.
And it's interesting because I think it resonates with people even outside of the faith, right?
Totally.
This is a human thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But as Christians, it's
Oh yeah.
it's almost like amplifying.
It's next level.
It's next level.
It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, so Thick Shades doesn't beat around the bush. They're like,
yeah, as Christians, we're under the microscope. They even quote those verses like from 1 Peter 1.16, be holy because I am holy.
and then there's Philippians 2.15.
Yeah.
Where it says, be blameless and harmless children of God without fault in a warped and crooked generation.
Right.
I mean,
No pressure.
no pressure, right?
But those verses are important, I think, to understand.
Not just as following the rule book,
Yeah.
but understanding the why behind them.
And the why is because we are supposed to be set apart and reflect something so much bigger than ourselves. And when we do that, when our actions start reflecting something greater than ourselves, it's like we become those lights in the world that Philippians talks about.
Okay, but lights in the world
What about when I'm tripping over my own 2 feet?
in the dark.
Right.
How do we shine like that when we're messing up all the time?
Well, that's a perfect segue into this whole idea of,
But, and they emphasize this,
yeah,
we are called to this high calling, but we are human.
and we have to give ourselves grace.
Yeah.
Because expecting ourselves to be perfect.
It's just setting us up for failure.
Oh, for sure, for burnout. And just what's the point?
Exactly.
I am so glad.
They put that but in there.
Because it's so freeing to hear that it's okay to not be perfect. And they even quote Romans 3.23, which is that verse that says, we all fall short of the glory of God.
All of us.
All of us. We all mess up.
Speaking of messing up, just the other day,
I had this whole situation.
let's just say it involved a very confused barista.
A forgotten wallet and a whole lot of apologies.
Oh.
I was mortified.
We've been there. How do you even recover from that?
Right.
We've all been there, right?
We have.
But that's what makes this concept of already but not yet so beautiful.
Because we are already declared righteous right now in this moment because of Jesus.
But the journey of becoming more like him,
that's ongoing.
so it's we're a work in progress.
Exactly. Think about learning a musical instrument.
At the moment you pick up a guitar, you're a musician.
Yeah.
But to become a virtuoso,
It takes time and practice.
right,
And you're going to hit some sour notes along the way.
you're going to hit a lot of bad notes.
Right. But you're still a musician.
And it's the same thing with our faith.
Oh, man, that's so good.
The journey, the sour notes. I love that.
But speaking of those sour notes, right?
Yeah.
They can really make you question everything.
It's true.
When you feel that pressure to be perfect.
I think that's where the Thick Shades message was okay.
Yeah.
Be aware of those perfectionism traps.
They're sneaky.
Right, because they're oh.
So sneaky. They whisper in our ear that our worth depends on us being flawless, on never messing up.
And you're wait.
Which is just never going to happen.
Yeah, that's not
possible.
It's not going to happen.
It's impossible.
So why even try?
Right.
Yeah, and they're saying the danger in that.
And we start to think oh.
Our mistakes disqualify us from God's love or being used by him.
And it's just not true.
No, it's so not true.
It's we totally forget about the whole grace thing.
Totally.
We forget about Ephesians 2.8-9.
For it is by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not from yourselves. It is the gift of God, not by works, so that no one can boast. Grace is free.
It's a gift.
Yes.
You can't earn it.
You can't earn it, and you can't lose it.
Just because you messed up.
It changes everything about how we view criticism.
Because if your worth comes from already being loved and accepted, it doesn't matter what anybody says.
Oh, that's huge.
So how do we actually do that?
How do we shift from proving ourselves to
resting in that grace?
It starts with understanding the difference between shame and guilt.
Okay.
Shame says, I am bad.
Okay.
It's an attack on who you are.
Guilt says I did a bad thing.
Oh, wow.
So it's action-based.
So if we're coming from a place of grace, we can own our mistakes, but not let it define us.
We can extend the same grace that Christ gives us. Because Romans 8.1 says, therefore, there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus.
Oh, my goodness.
No condemnation.
So even when I forget my wallet and I
Even then,
inconvenience the entire coffee shop.
you are still loved.
Okay.
You are still accepted.
I love that.
And when we get that deep down,
Yeah.
it changes everything.
Yeah.
Because we can look at criticism.
And we can say, is there anything here that can help me grow?
Oh, that's a good word.
Instead of like...
But you don't have to crumble under the weight of it.
Yes.
You don't have to try to be perfect.
Because your worth isn't based on that.
Exactly.
I love it.
It's like we're shifting from proving ourselves to like pursuing growth.
Yes.
And isn't that where we really see like God's strength? Like in those moments of vulnerability? Because we're not perfect, right?
It reminds me of 2 Corinthians 12.9, where God says, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness.
It's in those moments when we're like,
I don't have it all together. That's where we see God show up.
You know what that makes me think of?
They shared a story in the message about how someone's vulnerability
actually made their faith more relatable.
Right.
Because instead of trying to have all the answers,
were just real about their own struggles. And it was like way more powerful.
It's so true.
Like authenticity always trumps this idea of perfection.
Yes.
And there's this researcher, Brene Brown.
Have you heard of her?
Yes.
She talks about the power of vulnerability.
Yeah.
And her work isn't specifically about faith.
But the principle totally applies.
For sure.
She says people connect with us so much more.
When we're genuine.
Yes.
Not when we're trying to project this image of flawlessness.
Right. It's like we were talking about before.
Exactly.
That whole shifting our focus thing.
It's not about like pleasing every single critic out there.
It's about us.
But about, running our race with our eyes on the prize. Like Hebrews 12.12 says,
let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus.
Yes.
Not on everyone else.
And you know what's interesting?
What if we started looking at criticism?
Not as something to fear or avoid, but as potential feedback.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying every little thing is going to be like...
super helpful.
Right.
Or even accurate for that matter.
Right.
But if we can kind of go into it with an open mind...
sometimes it can really help us.
Yeah.
To kind of see our blind spots.
The areas that we need to grow in?
Oh, that's a good word.
It's like, we're not letting it make us feel condemned.
Right.
Or like define our worth. But we're like, okay, is there something here for me?
That can help me, like you said.
Exactly.
For my journey.
But the goal isn't to get everybody to like us.
Right.
Or to look perfect.
No.
It's about internal growth.
Yes.
Becoming more like Christ.
This has been so good.
It's amazing how much you can learn.
Just by really sitting down with something like this. And one thing I love about this message is...
it's so encouraging.
It is encouraging.
Because it's so easy to feel alone.
Yes.
When you're facing criticism.
Absolutely.
But it's like, no, you're not alone in this.
We're in it together.
We're all on this journey together.
It's a process, right?
Like we're learning, we're growing, we're messing up.
But we're receiving grace.
It's true. And like, no matter what.
God's grace is enough.
Always.
I love that part in the message at the end.
Where they have that poem.
Oh, yeah?
And it says, it is in our weakness that God's strength is made known.
So good.
It really is.
So as you go throughout your week,
here's something to think about.
If you could let go of that need to appear perfect.
To those who criticize you.
What's like one area of your faith?
That you would feel more free to like.
Explore.
Ooh, that's good.
Right.
That'll make you think.
And on that note.
We'll leave you to do just that.
Until next time, everyone.
Whew.